Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of eCommerce Lab by Ecomcy, the place of air related to Amazon FBA product level and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, founder and CEO of Ecomcy, and today we bring on a special guest. His name is Doug Peak, and he's the founder and CEO of Delightful Disruptive, which is a consultancy that specializes on everything that's to do with supporting CPG brands entering into retail. And that's why I wanted to bring Doug today because, especially for us Amazon brands or e-commerce brands in general, retail is usually the next kind of thing that we want to pursue once we have a successful journey online. And today we're going to be discussing, what are some of the things you have to consider, what are the mistakes you have to avoid, and how to make sure you can maximize the opportunity. So, Doug, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Vincenzo. Great to see you.
Pleasure to be here. How's everything going on your side? Everything okay?
Beautiful. Everything's great. Thank you.
Awesome. So I guess for those that might not know you, if you don't mind, just give us, a more in-depth introduction about yourself, and then of course let's dive into this conversation. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So I in 1992 had left my job working in the music business. I was 24 years old, and I was a graduate of USC's entrepreneur program. And I had always believed in my ability to become an entrepreneur. And so I just started thinking about different ideas. And I put together a list of about 15 different company ideas. And one that kept coming back to me was this idea of getting into the earplug business. And you might say, Vincenzo, why would you want to get into the earplug business? Well, the fact of the matter is I was a user of consumer earplugs. I use them for sleeping, studying, traveling, concerts. And when I went to go buy the products at my local drugstore, I noticed they were sold out a lot of the times. And I said, that's kind of interesting. And then I just started thinking about the market. And I realized that number one, earplugs are a highly consumable product. Number two, they're lightweight. Three, they're high margin, I would later learn. And most importantly to me at that time, there was no large CPG company or brand that was owning the category. And in this particular time, which was pre-internet, on the shelves. So I was like, let me just research this a little bit because I'm all about prudence. And so I started researching. And before I had known it, I had created this brand called Heroes, found a manufacturer locally, and built a package. And within 8 months of coming up with the idea, I took $15,000. It was my life savings. And I invested it in this idea of bringing high quality earplugs to consumers that were beautifully packaged, marketed, promoted, and sold. Because in the category, what I identified is that it was just a commodity. There was no marketing, there was no promotion, there was no brand. And part of my mission, going all the way back to 1992, was to build the next Kleenex in earplugs. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted people to refer to my earplugs as heroes, not we like your earplugs. We love heroes is what I wanted people to say. So started the journey in 1992. By 2008, I had grown Heroes and its sister brand to become the #1 and #2 best-selling brands with Walmart, Target, Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, Albertsons, Kroger, Whole Foods.
The big players.
We had 30,000 stores of distribution.
Wow.
By the way, at that time, the internet was still just a budding opportunity for CPG brands. We looked at it, quite honestly, as gravy, not the real heart and soul of our business, or the bread and butter, I should say. So when the economy corrected in 2009, 2010, retailers got really smart, and they said for commodity type categories, which they viewed earplugs as a commodity category, we're just going to go to private label. For a lot of them, they did, and store label. So at that moment, I took my savings and I built a state-of-the-art earplug manufacturing facility in Mexico, capable of producing 120 million earplugs a year. And while I can rattle that off on the tip of my tongue, let me just tell you, it was one of the most difficult, costly endeavors I have ever taken on in my life. And I still have PTSD around that whole experience. But the good news is I figured it out. And by 2018, we were very fortunate. I was the 100% owner of all of my entities, and very fortuitously, a very large private equity group came knocking on our doors and said, "We want to buy this. We really like what you've done." And I sold my company. That was in late 2008. Since that time, I've invested in a lot of different industries and become a diversified entrepreneur. I am back into CPG after getting over PTSD. And number one, I have started an elite selective CPG advisory services group called Delightfully Disruptive. Why? Because Delightfully Disruptive is what I stand for. It's about delighting the customer and disrupting the competition. And then in addition, I've been working for the last year on a very innovative new product for the CPG space that is scheduled to come to market sometime in early 2026.
Wow, what a story. It's like ups and downs, and it's so many, learnings. I'm sure we're gonna be discussing on today's podcast. Like, I think, the whole journey have most likely teach you so much about the retail space, because when you work with so many of these big names, I'm sure, like, first of all, the stress that you had and the things you had to learn on the go is mind blowing, right?
Well, I mean, I was having a conversation the other day. When you have a CPG company, and really, I would guess any company, I've only had one type of a company. There wasn't one day across the 26 years that I owned the company that I wasn't maniacally obsessed and thinking about it. It required that. And in regards to the national retailers, they definitely keep you on your toes. There is always some type of a landmine that I experience that at times they're putting in front of you that you've got to know how to sidestep and pivot around and really survive, thrive, and profit. And that's part of what my goal is with Delightfully Disruptive, is to help emerging CPG brands that are doing north of 5 million in top line sales, that believe they have something unique with key points of differences that would incrementally add to a retailer's set. If they have interest to go and they have the commitment, the patience, the grit, and the coachability, that's something that I believe I can be of help to many different people and many different brands. But it's a challenging thing. I was the point person for every major retailer. I felt as the CEO, that was very important, that the category manager, because the thing about, e-com is your brand is selling to all of your individual customers. Yeah. Well, in retail, it's a totally different beast. And the reason why I say it is because you're only selling to one person. That person is called a category manager or a buyer. And the criticality of working with that category manager is you have to earn their trust and their confidence, because in many ways, they are transferring their trust in you and their job in many ways. Because let's say, for example, and I'll tell you just a quick story. When I landed Walmart after 7 years of trying, and I got up from the table in Bentonville, Arkansas, with our buyer, where she had said that she was going to add one item. And she looked at me with the most focused look. And she simply said, "Now just don't miss any of my ship dates." And that's what she was talking about. The trust that she was placing in me. She only knew me for 30 minutes, but she knew, because we had earned Walgreens. We had been selling in Walgreens for 4 years at that point. And she knew that it was a relatively safe bet. She only allowed us one item because, bear in mind, and I don't mean to go on so long, but in this regard with retail buyers, category managers, their real estate is all they have.
Exactly.
So their shelves, if they dedicated, and let's say in this example with Walmart, let's assume that the buyer dedicated 4 spots of product for me. And for some reason, as a new company, I went out of business. Well, what's she going to do if she's got those 4 slots
Empty.
open with no product? Her boss
Yeah.
is going to come down and say, why do we have 4 empty shelves or 4 empty slots here for a product? And then she's got it. So anyway, very complicated business. You have to bring your A game every single day. And I don't even mean A game. I mean A+ game. You must execute flawlessly. And if you don't, you're going to get fined. And if you continue to, and there a lot of times you're kept on a very short leash, you will simply lose the account because there's dozens of companies.
That one, the opportunity. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, which brings me to, I guess, the first question, which is regarding how do you even make sure that you're ready for this? Because based on the conversation we've been having so far, it sounds like you really need to have very robust systems in terms of the inventory, your cash flow, all your internal operations, because it's like one simple mistake can definitely ruin the whole reputation with one of these big buyers. So I guess what is the first thing you have to consider before even going down this route of expanding to our retail locations?
Yeah, it is not an easy question to answer. In one way, it's very easy to answer. I was once asked, what's the one thing you have to get right when selling to a national retailer? And the answer was one word: everything. Because you have to get the product right, the pricing right. You must know your financials in and out. You must understand your vendor terms and how those vendor terms will relate to the retailer terms. Because very simple example, we at that time, and things are different when we were in the earlier days of selling to Walgreens and CVS and Walmart, Target, etc. Their terms for payment were around 30 to 35 days. The beauty of our business was that I had negotiated terms with our vendors for net 60 days. So we were getting paid before we had to pay. Now the challenge is many retailers are requiring more extended terms, and that requires, number one, either you better negotiate with your vendors and you have them buy in to your vision and your dream, or number two, you have the financing available to carry you through those phases when your money is tied up. So there's a lot of different things that need to get done, must be done correctly. And it's really what we do in Delightfully Disruptive. That is phase one of working with any e-commerce brand, which is we will do a top to bottom audit of the system, of the brands, of the leadership, the software, the tools, the various assets that you need in order to play with the big boys. And even I would say for local and regional chains as well. Local, not so much, but with a regional retailer, let's just say HEB or a Meijer, the requirements are pretty much the same.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something there that it's a big issue, especially when you do the transition from e-commerce to retail, which is cash flow. Like in e-commerce, you're used to that instant gratification. You get paid instantly, either through Amazon, to your website, you have the cash, and then you go and buy more inventory. Like on retail, like you say, 60, 90 days, most businesses go out of business by the time they get paid. So I guess that's...
May I add one other thing to that, Vincenzo, which is in many instances with retailers, not only do you have to factor your cost of inventory and the fact that once your item ships, you're not going to get paid for 60 plus days in many instances. But the other challenge is that in order to earn the support of a category manager, Target, for example, the requirement just for the vendor setup is $50,000. Each new item that is added is $15,000. So assume you're a an e-commerce brand, you have two really hot items and Target knocks on your door. Let's say you don't even go to them. They come to you and they say,
Yeah.
hey, we've got customers that are
Asking.
asking for your product. And you're like, great, let's do business. And they say, sure, we'd love to do business with you. Now here are the rules of engagement. Number one, we're going to require $50,000 up front. And for your 2 SKUs, that's another $30,000. So in addition to the inventory that you will have to ship in, and we will keep ordering on that. So it's not like just one order. When you ship to Target, 2 weeks after the product hits their distribution centers, they should be reordering. Now, if you've got 60-day terms, that means that you've got another 6 weeks of orders that you're going to have to fill before you potentially might see the dollars. And on top of it, let me just remind you that you committed to $80,000 in vendor setup.
No matter what. No matter what.
So you might, let's just assume for a second that on your first order, best case scenario, it is an $80,000 opening order. Well, after that 60 days, you may get a check for 1 penny because they have to offset your commitment with the inventory that you sent in. And that's where the rub comes in, because I would add also one of the complications with selling to retailers is there is a dirty little secret called chargebacks. And retailers can at times submit chargebacks to their vendors that are inaccurate. And what ends up happening is it's basically a pause button. And they might say, well, there were 20 shipments that you didn't put the label in the right place on your master case. And let's assume that's $100 per error. So now you've got a $2,000 fine that you have to fight. So that's where it gets complicated as well. So there's a lot of nuances to it. And that's why I go back to, it's critical that CPG e-commerce brands understand what I call the game of retail. And I would just point out real quickly that I wrote a book for e-commerce.
I'm going to put it down in the description so people can find it as well.
So I wrote a book called Stop or Go. And really, I wrote it for me, but 30 years ago, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And it's for founders. So e-commerce brands that are already in place, they have product, may not find as much value out of it, but you will understand the game of retail and you will learn the language that retail buyers speak. Because again, in e-commerce, the data, the metrics that e-commerce leaders are talking about, CAC, AOV, sorry, that doesn't apply here.
We're completely different.
We're talking about terms like velocity, turns, MABD, which stands for must arrive by date, POG, which stands for planogram. It's a completely different beast. And that's what I try and instill in anyone that we work with. And that is that you're playing a completely different game. You have to understand how the game's played, and you may ultimately decide it's not the game you want to play. Yeah,
I know. So actually something that you mentioned there as well is, and I'm very curious to hear more about that, is like everything that has to do with, the terms and delivery dates. Like I even heard for people to learn about this, that the fact that you give the inventory to some of these retailers, that you can also have situations where the product doesn't sell. In that case, the inventory can even get returned to you. Is that right? In this case, right? That's another thing that happens.
I laugh because my PTSD is coming up again. So yes, that is what's called in our industry, that's called an exit strategy. And how that plays out, it can happen in really one of two ways in some regards. There's a lot of ways that a retailer can exit out. The answer to your question is yes. The other thing that you must have when contemplating going into retail is, do you have product market fit? Do you have a loyal consumer? Do you do you have the right packaging that fits with the retailer's shelves or pegs for that matter? There's all these different variables that come into play. And I'll share with you the flip side of what you asked, Vincenzo, which is another tactic that we use to earn shelving space is if I am selling into Target, I don't have business. Let's assume for the moment I don't have Target as an account, but I want Target. And Target in their set, we call that set, which is the category, has 20 items. I'll assume for this example, it's shampoo. Mm-hmm. So for this shampoo item, I'm in the shampoo business. I've got shampoo and conditioner, Doug's shampoo and conditioner. It's got unique points of difference. It grows your hair this high in 2 days, let's say. And the thing is I want to earn Target's business. But how can I inspire the Target buyer to want to buy my product outside of the usual? We have 4 out of 5 star reviews on Amazon. We're moving 10,000 units per month through Amazon. We have a great DTC business. We've got TikTok. That's all fine and dandy. Retail is a different game. The way that I might approach it from an experienced expert perspective is I would gather the data of Target's sales. How much are they selling of each of the 20 items? Can I identify a weak player? And can I then suggest to the buyer, Mr. Buyer, I see that you've got brand A. They've got 2 items. They're vastly underperforming in your set, where most items in the category are moving 4 units per store per week. This item's only moving 1.5 units per store per week. I know you know this, but how about if I help this situation? If you share with me what your inventory is in the stores and at the distribution centers, perhaps we can work out an exit strategy that I will own in order to help facilitate our bringing in our items. By doing so, we just eliminated a problem vendor and a problem line for that buyer, and we created a friction-free pathway for that buyer to say, yes, that makes a lot of sense.
Let's give it a try. Yeah. Which I guess that brings me also to a question I get asked a lot is like, of course, let's assume, we have the cash flow based on all the conditions we've been discussing. We have the operations, the software, like we're ready to go. I think a big question that people sometimes ask themselves is like, how do I know my product will perform in retail? Because some products sometimes are only made to be, performing online, but sometimes you put in retail and they just don't perform because of the nature of the customer base that goes to the retail location and things like that. So is there a way for me to do a pre-analysis before doing this commitment? Like, how do you go around that? Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, the answer to your question is it depends, because if I'm the CEO of a CPG brand and I'm questioning whether or not my successful e-commerce products will sell at retail, that just tells me I've got to do my homework. My homework could be in the form of selling to a local retailer down the street, one store. How does it do in there? Do I go to a regional retailer? How does it do in there? What is the configuration of the packaging that my product is in versus the competition? Will my products even fit in their sets? Is it the right price point? Is it the right brand? Like, there are so many different variables, and my brands came up through retail. So, our first big pin to drop was Walgreens. We had been selling in a lot of different ancillary, what I would call niche markets, and the product sold everywhere it went. It always sold. Is earplugs the fastest moving category? No, but it's a decent moving category. So when we had the opportunity to expand into any retailer, there was never a doubt for me. And so I would like to know more the background of who those brands were that had a product that went into an established category, had a track record of success through ecom, and somehow it fell flat. To me, I'd like to learn more about that. It could have to do with perhaps the location of the product in the store. Is it at someone's ankles?
Yeah.
That's a big thing. The exact location in the store is critical. Again, the pricing. Is the rest of the category priced at $3.99 and you're priced at $12.99? Well, unless you've got something really special, that's going to make it very challenging to compete with the existing competition. So that is, again, part of an audit that one must do. And it's part of the what I would call just straightforward conversation that I would have with any CPG, CEO, or leadership, in order to help them understand. In some cases, I'll share one suggestion that could be made in this example where people where it didn't work. Well, one thing that an e-commerce brand can do is they can design a product specifically for retail. You do that for two reasons. One, because you want it to be compatible with the retailer's systems. And number two, you want to be able to have a differentiator because you don't want to cannibalize the business that you've established online. So that's something, again, very complicated business.
Yeah.
Involves a lot of thought, a lot of strategy, a lot of analysis, and a lot of what if conversations.
Yeah. So now when it comes to these retail locations, given that in some instances you might have, one shot in terms of, you really want to put your best face forward when you're doing these kind of introductions and potentially meeting with these, representatives that could give you the opportunity. Is there some kind of, I guess, ranking list that people could refer to? And what I mean by that is, for example, let's say we have Walmart, Target, we have Walgreens as an example. Like, is there some kind of retail that easier to get into that you could use as small case studies to then build up towards the big retailers? Like, should you always go first with the small chains to build yourself a reputation before going for the big retailers? Or sometimes you can go straight to, the Walmarts and the Walgreens. Like, what do you usually recommend in that case?
Well, in our particular case, the way that my business evolved was, and again, we started pre-internet, but I will bring that into the conversation. We started off selling to a lot of different niches because the product could sell to a lot of different niches. It takes time to earn the trust of category managers. And that is because of the risk factor that they bear when looking at new brands. So you really have to just, in many regards, you've got to know the business, you've got to know your competition, and you have to know where you fit. So that sometimes takes time as well. And it's funny because in my particular trajectory, I'll share with you, I landed Walgreens after 4 years of being in the business. That was the first big pin to drop, as I mentioned. Secondly, I had to wait another 4 years to land Walmart. That was the second pin. Then in year 9, I landed Target. 12 was Rite Aid, when they were a significant chain with 3,500 stores. They were a big player. And in year 15, I landed CVS. Now, I mention that because there was one chain that I wanted since I started, and they were a small regional chain called Bartell's. Bartell's was acquired within the last few years by Rite Aid, but it took me 17 years to get an appointment with the buyer. No joke. Wow. 17 years. And once I got that appointment with the buyer, it was kind of funny because he started off the conversation, and this was at a time when our pink earplugs were just red hot, selling everywhere. I mean, just a national #1 seller in a matter of 3 years when they came out. And he starts off the conversation by saying, he goes, nobody needs pink earplugs. And I'm thinking to myself, because I'm leading the sales presentation, I'm thinking, great, we're starting off with friction. But I would say the way that I handled it and the way that I handled all category manager relationships was with honesty. And the fact of the matter was, I worked on the front line of earplug sales every day. And so these buyers, the earplugs as a whole of their business only represented about 2 to 3% of their business. So they didn't really care that much about it. And in many instances, they really didn't know anything about it. So if I could present, look, I've been in the business for 25 years. Our experiences and our data shows that's not necessarily true. And when
I think just a quick pause. Doug, I think I cannot hear you now. I cannot hear you. Just now I hear you. Let's see.
I don't know.
Good. Yeah. So it's fine. I make a note and we connected. So you can continue where we were left. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the funny thing about it was, after disagreeing with the buyer, I earned not only the account, but we became his #1 seller. He cleared out the whole category for our products because he trusted me. He trusted me to tell him what he didn't know. And that's another thing I think is really important for the passionate e-commerce sellers that are new. They're disruptors. They're doing things that others aren't doing, and they're having success. Being able to go into a national buyer's office and tell them from the street level with street cred, this is what's happening. You may not be doing it, but this is what's moving, and this is what's resonating with your customer. That is very impactful when you're in a meeting, because they don't know. From the buyer's perspective, a lot of times, even though they have data to refer to, they don't know what they don't know. So it's important to be that educator. And that's the other thing I would add, which is, I always looked at myself not as a salesperson. I'm just a guy that knew the business, and I'm here to educate you on what I know. And if it resonates, great. And if not, maybe it will in the future.
Yeah. No, I think it's very good example of, sometimes, especially when you're having these encounters, like they don't know your business. You have to sell yourself, your story, like why you're there, why your product is a must have on their stores, and just make yourself indispensable for them to have on their shelves. It's all about how you portray yourself. But I think, to be honest with you, Doug, I learned so much with you today. Like, I know we're only scratching the surface, and there's so much more. Like, I'm actually super excited about learning more from you. And that's why I know that our listeners and the ones watching most likely want to also, reach out to you, because you have so many, insights about this topic. Maybe they want to work with you. They want to have a look at your book, your community. So to start conclude, tell us more about that, how people can find you. And then, of course, I'll make sure to put everything down in the description. Yeah.
Sure. Well, for right now, Delightfully Disruptive, the firm, is setting up to launch officially later this year. And so the best way to get me is LinkedIn. That's an easy way. Just look for Doug Pick. You can also go to dougpick.com, just my name. And there's a lot of information about my background. There's 5 free chapters of my book that are there. And I also put together what I think would be very instructive for your listeners. I put together a box set, which is called From Zero to Hero, My Journey to Sell 500 Million Earplugs. And that has 5 stories of what it's like to be on the front line with companies like Walgreens and Rite Aid and the competition, as well as there's one story that people tend to get a kick out of when I was going through the challenges of building and figuring out how to get the earplug manufacturing piece going. There's a story called How Making Earplugs Landed Me in a Mexican Jail, and it's 100% true.
Wow. Cool. So I'm gonna make sure everybody can find those resources below. But other than that, Doug, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to hopefully meet you soon. And other than that, it's been a pleasure. So thank you. Thank you
Awesome.
so
Thank
much.
you, Vincenzo.
Thank you, Doug. Have a good one. Bye bye.